Hello and welcome to our final installment of the Screen Reader Savvy online class. Today's presentation is going to focus more on some of the troubleshooting aspect of screen readers and kind of working through some issues. There will also be a second video in the Google Drive that runs through using some inaccessible or less accessible websites and show you how to recognize those. So let's go ahead and get started. Troubleshooting. Generally, there's a help section in all the screen readers, like we talked about the first few weeks in class. Usually refer to the getting help sections of the screen reader. Will answer a lot of your concerns. But as a general rule, if your screen reader is not speaking, you're going to want to check your volume mixer in your system settings. I show you here in the screenshot a screenshot of JAWS. The volume mixer with the JAWS highlighted, showing that the screen reader is not muted and that the volume is in line with all of the other options. But that also is something that you can check with the screen reader on. It will tell you this information. Another thing is Google is your friend. If you cannot figure out why something works the way it does, Google's great. And if it makes you feel any better, I Google a lot. The only difference is a lot of times I know the fancy schmancy terms that's going to get me the response I need, where not everybody will know that. So being patient and kind of keeping the terminology in mind when you're doing a Google search usually is helpful. Another troubleshooting tip, has your browser updated recently? If it has, this may cause some problems with how it works with your screen reader. You need to turn off the automatic updates if at all possible. You can do it in Firefox. You can open the options menu with an Alt plus T and then the letter O as shown here. You will open the Firefox options page in a new tab. Scroll down or navigate down with a tab until you see the heading Firefox Updates, or that you hear you're focused on the automatically install updates, and use the spacebar to uncheck that radio button. Now this is really far down on the page, so it might be somewhat discouraging when you don't hear it right away and think it's not there. It's pretty far down. And this is just the same information, just with some screenshots to show visually what you're looking for. And such like that. If you are using Firefox, it is a very good idea to turn off the automatic updates because sometimes updates do more harm than good. On the other hand, if something isn't working, it might mean, and it had been working before, it might mean that the website kind of updated or somebody changed something in there, and maybe an update would help. So use your best judgment. Think of it this way: if the website doesn't work and you update and the website still doesn't work, then you haven't really lost anything. More troubleshooting tips. If you're using Chrome, unfortunately, you cannot disable automatic updates the way you can with Firefox. It has to be done on the PC. If you're not the network administrator of your PC, you're kind of out of luck. My best advice, if you are not, is bring some cookies. Then tell your network administrator to delete the cookies. And if they have a sense of humor, they'll eat the cookies. If they don't, well, at least you gave it a shot. But if you are the administrator of your own computer, there's a link here and how to stop automatic Chrome updates in Windows, or you can always do your own fresh Google search if you want. And it does, most of the articles I found do have nice little descriptions and screenshots and really nice step-by-step. So it is possible to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about accessibility, and we have discussed this before in the previous two classes. Websites have to be designed from the ground up by developers. And this means that the web designs have to build in those elements that we've talked about, like headings and links and frames and lists and things like that when creating the website. Screen readers can identify the coding that was used by the developers and navigates the site that way. But if there is no coding that was made that way, then they're not going to be either as accessible or navigable or accessible at all, depending. Um, Accessible sites are not always user friendly. There are some websites that are technically accessible, but that does not mean they are not a pain in the neck. Those are two vastly different terms. A website can be accessible and user friendly, or accessible but not user friendly. And just remember that it's your responsibility or your student's responsibility to be a competent screen reader user to make the tool work. It's not the website's necessarily responsibility to make it easy. It helps when they do, and I'm sure they develop or they appreciate some feedback relating to that. But I think that sometimes sighted people have trouble with websites too because things are visually overwhelming and what they need is buried somewhere on that site and hard to get to or locate or figure out where it is. And that's the same way with a screen reader. And there are some sighted people that can look at a website and feel super overwhelmed and just don't even want to go there. And the same thing is true with people using screen readers. How do I know if it's accessible? It's these days it's really kind of hard because you cannot tell by looking. It used to be that if there were a lot of graphics on a website and a lot of frames and advertisements and stuff, that it wasn't generally accessible, but that's really not the case anymore. So you really can't tell by looking at it anymore the way you used to. If you can select text letter by letter and the text on the site is not a quote unquote picture of the text, it's more than likely accessible. Even so, some of those pictures might have alt text or alternative text assigned to them that are like descriptions. So even if it is a picture, it's very possible that the alternate text contains the same information as a visual picture. So that isn't always a predictor either. Probably the best way to tell is to turn the screen reader on and try to navigate by links or elements or tabbing or by headings with the letter H and listen to see whether the screen reader echoes the content correctly. Open the links list in JAWS or the elements list in NVDA, both with their modifier key plus F7. If the links or other elements appear and have names, then the site is probably navigable and accessible. If they don't have names, just a bunch of numbers or gibberish assigned to the link, then it's probably not accessible because, hello, how do I know where I'm going if it doesn't have a name on the link attached? So those are just some good ways to do some guessing. Accessible websites, obviously our website is accessible. CNN is pretty good. Channel 3000 is pretty good, which is the news station out of Madison, and believe it or not, NASA is also very good, especially these days with the push to make STEM or STEAM, depending on where you are, accessible to people with various disabilities. So we're going to go through a couple of these in another video on this drive and kind of look through that. We're also going to look at these examples of inaccessible or partially inaccessible websites. And I'm telling you which ones, there are 3 of them, and I'll give you an example about why they are not accessible. For example, the first one is most of the site is accessible, except when you try to see the channel listing, the screen reader won't read them. You can mouse over it and scroll, but when I tried with both JAWS and NVDA, at this time it wasn't accessible. The same with AT&T. Content below the main banner, it looks like headings. They really do. They look like there are headings because the headings, the text is bolded and quite large, but they are not marked as headings. So you have to arrow down through everything if you want to read the content, and that doesn't make it inaccessible. It just makes it a little bit less user-friendly. On the upside, though, the pictures have alternative text. I was very happy to see that. And the last one is WCLO. The main website is very, very easy to deal with. But if you open the Listen Now link and try to listen to the live broadcast, you'll get to a pop-up, and that pop-up has a lot of information in it, but the play, stop, and mute and all of those buttons are not labeled. So once you open it, you have to, if you want to stop the playback or anything, you have to close that window. So I just wanted to show you what it looks like when the embedded buttons are not accessible. And we'll look at some other things like that as well. There are some really good strategies for navigating unfamiliar websites. There is a reason why people with vision impairments, and generally people, no matter who you are, go to the same websites all the time. It's because they're predictable. It's because you know how they're laid out. And not a lot other than the content is going to change. So, but there are times you, as a screen reader user or your student, will have to navigate to websites that are not familiar. And turning on the screen reader and trying to navigate by links or elements using that tab key, or headings using the H like we talked about before for checking for accessibility, is also a advantage. It'll help you out when you're looking for things that are unfamiliar. If you open the links list, it's the same thing. Use your arrow keys to go down the links presented to you and the elements presented to you as well. If you're not sure exactly where you are on the web page, if you do a Control Home, go back to the top of the page and start again by navigating by the same element, headings, links, tables, lists, however you want to do it, to get the feel of the layout of the page. One thing I did not put in here is how to do a virtual search with your screen reader. And I will cover that in the video that we talk about later, because that is another good strategy, and I really should have included that here. If you find yourself running into a lot of links or language as a string of gibberish or focused on ads, try navigating to a different frame using the letter M. If the frames are labeled, you should be able to identify the main area of the site and navigate by the element of your choice. That is becoming more and more not the case where the ads are in frames, but it does happen, so it's good to know. You can also do the JAWS plus F1 to have the screen reader echo the page formatting. NVDA does not have the same equivalent though, which is kind of a shame. JAWS has a feature that we're also going to look at called Convenient OCR. It was introduced several versions back, but not everybody jumped on that bandwagon because I don't think they understood how it worked. And they also had programs that used OCR that were separate, like OpenBook and things like that, where they would just have that recognize the text. Convenient OCR often starts automatically when you're opening a PDF in Adobe, but it can work in other applications as well. It can be activated manually if it doesn't start right away. So that's another thing we're going to look at in a separate video that's in this folder. But I'm going to run you through a little bit. If it doesn't start, if you need to access something and the Convenient OCR does not start, you can do the following. The JAWS key and the space, and then you'll hear a little noise, and then you follow with the letter O. JAWS will say Convenient OCR, and then you can pick one of the following. If you choose the letter D, it will recognize the current document when it's like a PDF or something in that sort of format. JAWS will tell you if it can't run that for some reason, if you're located on something that it doesn't believe that it can do OCR on. If you press a C, it will recognize the currently selected control, like a graphic button. This works like in an HTML environment, like a web page. So if you are like on a button that isn't labeled, but you suspect it has print on it, you can do that. If you press a W at this time, it will recognize the current application window. If you press an S, it will recognize the entire screen. The Q will cancel recognition when it's in progress. So that means you started OCR and then you said, oh wait, never mind, or it was taking too long, especially for a larger document. The question mark at this point will speak a brief help message and describe the commands, which is really good because that will help you decide what you need to do at a particular point. When the dialog box, that's the recognized text, is going to pop up, it's going to come up and you can press enter to indicate you do want OCR to recognize the document. In about 30 seconds, more or less, if it's a bigger document, it'll take more, JAWS will open an HTML version of that PDF that can be navigated by headings, tables, links, and other elements because JAWS is giving those items its quote-unquote best guess. One thing that we've talked about briefly and not very much is the fact that you can get add-ons for NVDA. That's kind of like special features that aren't included in the download by default. It makes NVDA a little bit more compatible with existing applications and gives them more features. They are typically free unless they are paid voice synthesizer options. There are three links that I have here. The first one is the official add-on repository. The second one is the official add-on repository where the versions are under development, so they're not stable. And the third one is Jeff's add-on repository, and he is a developer that adds a lot of options and scripts for NVDA to make it work with applications and environments that it maybe isn't designed to originally. One example of an add-on that I used with one of my students and his parents was they wanted to help him with web navigation, so I added an add-on where the NVDA cursor highlights where it is visually in a more obvious way so that they could visually see where he was and then help him. And that was a free add-on. And it also helps you if you are working with a student. I try really hard not to do it with students that have partial vision just because it's not teaching them to rely on their ears. So that's just a side note. This is a brief video that talks about how to get add-ons, and I would encourage you to kind of check that out. It's not my video, but I did want to include it. The same capability is available, with JAWS. JAWS has several scripts or programs that help it function better with other programs. Some of the sites that I listed offer paid scripts and other ones are free downloads. Some often offer what they call custom script services, where you can hire a programmer to create scripts to work with a specific piece of software. I know that was a lot of information, but I'm sure that you guys will process it. Just practice. That's all I can tell you. I feel like I'm not really giving you tools, but you're the person who needs to implement those and work on it and perfect the skill set. So if you would like some extra help or feedback, please feel free to email or call at any time. I know this is the last video of our class, and I want to thank you for hanging in there. If you have any suggestions for how this class can be improved, please let me know, and I would be more than happy to implement those the next time this class is offered. Thanks very much for joining us, and have a wonderful day.